Welcome to our channel. In this video, we are going to talk about how Microsoft saved Apple. So before starting, please like this video, and subscribe to our channel for future updates. It became the first trillion-dollar corporation in 2018, and it has since attained a cult-like reputation. People line up outside Apple stores to be the first to get their hands on the latest iPhone and to become a part of the brand. However, the story is about much more than technology. There are enough Apple anecdotes to fill books, feature films, and YouTube channels, but this is company forensics, and today we're going to discuss the moment when Apple was on the verge of going out of business. Apple was a ship without a captain in the late 1990s. They ended the first quarter of 1997 with a burn rate of $708 million. In 2020 dollars, that's nearly $1.1 billion. It was a watershed point in the company's history. And witnessing how goods like the iPhone have changed the globe, it's a watershed point in our history. Apple became what it is now as a result of visionaries clashing with one another, egos fighting reality, and sometimes winning, stolen ideas, and decades-long conflicts. A trip back to the 1990s. Apple was a vastly different corporation in 1997. It wasn't selling cell phones, which hadn't even been invented at the time, but rather PCs. Apple was a computer company back then, and their name reflected that, but it was a company in decline by all accounts. Apple computers were simply too costly to be widely adopted. Although they had good profitability, their market share was pitiful. Because Apple refused to license its operating system to other businesses, they were forced to turn to the only alternative option, Microsoft. Keep in mind that the great majority of computers in the 1990s were employed for commercial purposes. Their primary asset was the software they possessed, and if your computer lacked the appropriate tools, it was effectively useless. To large corporations, Microsoft had a remarkable 90% market share in 1997, therefore it's no surprise that practically all of the software being developed at the time was for Windows. Steve Jobs' demise. Apple's first truly successful computer was the Apple II. The insides housed Wozniak's technological prowess, but the outside, or shell, was now the product of Jobs' aesthetic obsession. The Apple II was instrumental in Apple's early success. The fact that the Apple II was an open architecture computer, which meant it was sold to the education, small business, and home markets, contributed to its success. IBM, their biggest competitor at the time, was uninterested in any of these markets. Steve Jobs, who had been passing the CEO hat to someone else, a man named Michael Scott, since the beginning, took on the project of Apple's future computer. The Lisa is his daughter's name. The project was groundbreaking. It was the first graphical user interface GUI computer aimed at home and small business users. Lisa, on the other hand, experienced delays and went over budget. It brought out the worst in Steve Jobs, and many of the engineers on the Lisa team remember him with vehement hatred. Steve was eventually removed from the project entirely. It could have been the first indication of Steve's peculiar personality. John Sculley, another important figure in Apple's history, joined the company in 1983. Jobs wooed the former Pepsi CEO with a quote that will live in infamy: "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water? Do you want to join me and help to change the world?" Sculley and Jobs would have a major squabble. The Macintosh was doing well, but it couldn't compete with well-known brands like IBM, and the new Windows was becoming a threat. By the way, the Macintosh was a closed architecture computer. As a result, the market was more restricted. You see, this is a component of the philosophical conflict. Steve Jobs was a firm believer in the convergence of hardware and software. Architecture that is closed. Sculley was a proponent of open architecture. Steve Jobs attempted what can only be described as a coup attempt in 1985. He tried to persuade the board to remove Sculley, but it backfired. After Steve Jobs left the company through the back door, the board decided to fire him. He sold all but one of his 6.5 million shares in the company, allowing him to continue receiving company reports and attending shareholder meetings. In 1985, Apple became a publicly traded company. Steve Jobs sold 6.5 million shares for $70 million. He spent $5 million in Pixar, a small visual effects company. They bought Next, the firm Steve had founded after leaving Apple, in February, but Apple's finances were in such bad shape at the time that Steve Jobs didn't get any money for the purchase. Instead, he got Apple stock, namely 1.5 million shares, but that wasn't enough. Apple had fewer than 90 days worth of cash in the bank by the end of July. Apple had lost over $1 billion in a single year and was valued at less than $3 billion, but suddenly, the apple falls from the tree. The graphical user interface, or GUI, was always Apple's strongest asset. It's what set them apart from IBM at the time. However, in the early 1990s, IBM began to catch up, thanks in part to Windows, a multi-computer operating system. Once again, open architecture is the name of the game. Apple also struggled because it released goods that were too similar to one another and failed to sell them effectively. They became such a long shot that IBM and Sun Microsystems both made offers to buy them. Neither agreement went through. Around the same time, Scully was fired from the company. Apple began licensing Mac OS so that it could be installed on any machine in a desperate attempt to make income. That's correct. You could buy Mac OS in 1995 and install it on a non-Apple computer. By 1996, Apple had changed CEOs once more, this time bringing in Gil Amelio, a well-known corporate rehabilitator. In an attempt to reach profitability, he fired several workers, but it wasn't enough. An announcement that sent shockwaves around the globe. Steve Jobs said the following on August 6, 1997. Today, I'd like to announce one of our first relationships, one that is quite important to us, and that is with Microsoft. The audience's reaction was hesitant. They couldn't understand how Apple could collaborate with their biggest competitor, who was threatening to put them out of business. Things worsened as the announcement progressed. Steve Jobs announced, among other things, Apple's intention to make Internet Explorer the default browser on the Macintosh. It was despised by the audience. He went on to say, finally, Microsoft has decided to invest in Apple. Microsoft is investing $150 million in Apple stock at current market value. They've committed to non-voting shares. Non-voting is the essential word here. Microsoft had no intention of acquiring Apple. Instead, it was just a matter of finding it, but Bill Gates wasn't just donating cash. The second component is that Microsoft has pledged to continue to provide Microsoft Office for Macintosh for the next 5 years. Bill Gates solved the problem with the software I discussed before that was essentially dragging Apple down on his own. No one would buy an Apple computer if it didn't come with Microsoft Office, and here's Bill Gates giving it out for free in exchange for stock that he could have bought on the open market. So, what motivated Bill Gates to do it? Why save Apple on the eve of what would have been their demise at Microsoft's hands? There is always a snag. As you might expect, Bill Gates did not do this out of the goodness of his heart. Bill Gates, in reality, had a shady reputation at the time. He wasn't interested in philanthropy at the time. Instead, he was portrayed as a ruthless businessman prepared to go to any length to win in his field, and by all accounts, Microsoft was a huge success, so much so that antitrust investigators were looking into it. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go and also press the bell icon so that you can get notification about our new videos. If it was helpful then share it with others. Thanks for watching the video.